Hello, welcome to REDLINING Anderson. I'm glad you're here to join me. Today we're going to be talking about the most gentrified city in the United States, no surprise, San Francisco. My channel is about explaining economic, political, and business terms in simple English. That's what my goal is. Right now we're dealing with the subject of gentrification. And we must first of all start out with what is gentrification. Gentrification is a term that was coined by Ruth Glass. Let me say gentrification as a term itself has nothing to do with race. Gentrification has to do with social mobility. The word gentrification came from the word gentry. Gentry was a term that the French used to describe the class in between the upper and the middle and the lower class, or the bottom people. You must destroy an area to gentrify. The tools that were used was redlining. Believe it or not, people say it's not true. There's some redlining being done today. Maybe not by the government, but it's being done. Zoning is a massive tool which cities use to gentrify. A lot of cities no longer have the money that they used to have before, so they have to gentrify. Restrictive covenants. In other words, if you had a title for a home, it could be a provision in that title how you can move that home. Right flight, self-explanatory. The rent gap theory. The theory is that the rent gets, or the house price gets so high close to the tax value, it's not worth even being there. Let's talk a little bit about the history of housing. You can start back at FDR and the New Deal. Then you can go to Title I housing in 1949, slum clearance, urban renewal. But for San Francisco, it was a little bit different. San Francisco really started to take off after the gold rush. People came from all over the world. In 1850, the Continental Railroad completed, actually in 1869, the railroad was completed, and that really opened up California. In 1906 was the famous earthquake where it started a panic in terms of finance. San Francisco was also the home of the League of Nations, which was the predecessor for the United Nations. The immigration rate in San Francisco in the 18th century, San Francisco was like a melting pot. I should say the 19th century, I'm sorry. The Chinese arrived in about 1840 to 1850. At that point, they were the single largest Chinese group outside of China. People came over for gold. The Japanese came. Interesting about the Japanese, when they came, they turned their traditional garments into Western garments. And they arrived in San Francisco about 1869. I mentioned that because maybe they knew something that maybe we didn't know. The Italians formed in North Beach a little early, and Peter G. one of the immigrants there, on the end of the earthquake, started Bank of America. So that started out there. The blacks started to come up in 1910 to 1930 and 1940 to 1970. The numbers weren't like in northern cities, northeastern cities, but a fair amount came in. Just a little plug for a movie if you get a chance. Get a look at The Last Black Man in San Francisco. It's a 2019 movie about, it's a good movie, I saw it. Let's talk about the Fillmore District. Fillmore District is really one of the most famous districts in San Francisco. It's where the musicians and the artisans were. It was black. It's gentrified or about to. You can also talk about the Mission District, which went through quite a bit. It is a district of Nancy Pelosi. And in 1920 it was Polish, 1940 it was Mexican, 1960 Chicano Latino, LGBTQ, in 70 and 1990 is mainly Latino. It is massively being gentrified. Keep in mind, San Francisco was kind of unique. San Francisco did not suffer what other cities suffered in the 70s. San Francisco wasn't really that much of an industrialized city. It was a port city. One of the things that San Francisco did, ironically, because of its notoriety, Airbnb is huge in San Francisco. People are buying homes, gentrifying them, and turning them to Airbnbs. Rent control is in San Francisco. There are still a substantial amount of SRO, single room occupancy in San Francisco, but they're going away as well. I should mention the Elvis Act. This has to be talked about. In San Francisco, there's an Elvis Act, and what that means is that under certain provisions, a landowner or landlord can close his building down, move all the tenants out, the way I understand it, and re-enter it into the market as a condo or cooperative. Oakland, the flatlands in Oakland, California, Chinatown is one of the oldest Chinatowns in the United States. Oakland is now starting to get gentrified as well. Downtown Oakland is like it's like ground zero for gentrification. The Mission District, as I said, it's in 1990, 2000, you've gotten a one bedroom for $900 a month. Now it's $1,800 to $2,300. And now let me tell a little brief story, a sad one about Manila Town. When the United States occupied the Philippines, in San Francisco, the United States occupied the Philippines in 1898. The Chinese have been in San Francisco for a long time as cheap workers. But the United States government had issues with Chinese immigration and limited their immigration. This gave an opportunity for the Filipinos to come over. And when the Filipinos came over, they were a cheaper labor force, but they were not able to bring their families. The single men came over. There was they lived in one area near Chinatown in San Francisco. What happened on August 4th, 1977, the International Hotel in Manila Town, they evicted all the people. It was a major story in the United States. And they just kicked the Filipinos out. Even though they were a cheap labor force. But remember this, in the gentrification process, there are house flippers. In San Francisco, the Airbnb thing is huge in San Francisco. Seniors, the uninformed, the uneducated are being taken advantage of. They are giving people money to move. They are making it extremely untenable to stay in a lot of places in San Francisco, and they're cutting back on the services dramatically. I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Give me a thumbs up, and I know you're going to subscribe. Have a great day. Bye.